is my third attempt at this. I am trying to encapsulate what kind of a person I was prior to beginning my voyage of self-discovery. As a child, as a small child, up until about the age of 12 or so, I was very shy, prone to temper tantrums, very insecure, lived in a dysfunctional home in that my father was alcoholic and never knew when he was going to come home and what he was going to be like when he came home. I don't have a lot of nice memories of childhood. Don't have a lot of memories of being held by my parents and being told that I'm a good boy and all that sort of stuff. I don't have those kind of memories at all. I'm sure they held me at some times, but there's nothing positive there. And with the chaos that would happen when my father would come home, I found a place to escape into the world of fantasy, which was created up in here. And that became a tool that I used for a good part of my life to escape the reality of what is. When I was 12 years old, my father and mother split, and my mother and I moved into my grandmother's basement. And I was a good boy. I went to school. I was in junior high school, grades 7 and 8. Good boy, didn't get into trouble, shy, quiet, didn't like physical education classes, had a couple of friends, kind of like I was, not, we certainly weren't the in crowd, that's for sure. And that, just went to school and did what I did. But the year I was 15, 1960, during the summer, I met a fellow who smoked. And when I went back to school, I was a smoker and started hanging out with the smokers. Well, the smokers were also the drinkers. And I got introduced to alcohol, and away I went. One of the first things I did was to steal a bottle of my mother's homemade concoction, and got very drunk and very sick and very hungover, and could hardly wait to do it again. Early October of 1962, I was in grade 11, and I was walking down the corridor past the principal's office, and I saw the police cars out the front. And so I just kept walking, and I walked out, down the corridor and out of the school, and I never returned. When I was 17, we moved out of my grandmother's place and we moved to another part of the city, and it was not one of the better neighborhoods, one of the better areas, and I made new friends. Well, the new friends were interesting people. Most of them, or some of them, their parents were on welfare, and lots of them had been in trouble with the police and stuff like that, and that's the kind of people I started hanging out with. And one of those people was a girl who was 2 years younger than me, and she became my first love. And finally somebody was loving me. Finally somebody was loving me. At least I thought, with all the fantasies I created in my head. And eventually she found somebody else that more suited her purposes than me. And I was left out there in the cold. And was not emotionally equipped for that at all. And ended up having to get psychiatric help and whatnot. It was not pretty, but sort of got myself back on my feet, and then it was about 2 months after I was 18, I got a real big wake-up call. I found myself in jail for a week, locked up for 7 days The first night laying there on the bunk watching the cockroaches crawl up the wall and across the ceiling. It was that kind of place. It did what it needed to do. It convinced me that I never wanted to see the inside of one of those places again. And I was placed on probation and decided to clean up my act a bit. But still, no sense of self, no feeling good about myself forever. And in hindsight now, I was dealing with depression a lot. And at the time, I didn't even know it. But depression has been with me since very early in my life. Also, there was no role models, male role model in my life to show me what it was like to be a man, to be all those things, I was 19, a year later I'm 19, and too much for my mother to handle, so I go and move in with my father, which is an interesting experience. We get a one-bedroom apartment together, and I'm pouring my dad's bottles down the sink so he won't drink them, and he just picks up the phone and the bootlegger brings another one. That kind of thing. But there was one thing that my father did, for which I'm very thankful. The one good thing that he did for me in my life. I had been let go from my job and I wasn't doing anything, and he was an architect. He worked in a small office. It was a 3-man office, and he took me to work with him, and they sat me down at a drawing board and gave me the utensils to do what I had to do, and I started my career. And I am still doing that career 56 years later, only now it's all on a computer. And so, I had a steady job. I started out at $100 a month, and managed to save up enough money and buy a car. And I forgot to mention that I'd lost my driver's license once for a year after hitting a pedestrian when I was 17, and then I had sent it back to the government for another year after I had some encounters with the police. So I'm 19 and I get my license back again, and I buy a car. And this one day I'm out with a friend of mine and we're driving along the road and we see a couple of girls and he knows one of them, so we pull over and start chatting them up. And one of them takes a shine to me and I take a shine to her, and she's the Italian girl. Her name's Maria Antonia. And Maria Antonia, her and I start to get together and start to spend a lot of time together in that. So this is in the spring of 1965. By August of 1965, we are pregnant. Yes, we are. Yes, we're pregnant. And by August 30th of 1965, a very nervous Rik is standing in the front of a Catholic church as his bride walks down the aisle with a little bit of a tummy on her. And we got married. And got ourselves a little basement suite, and I've got Doggy here in front of me, so we're petting Doggy while we're doing this. And the following April, our first son was born, Michael. And 13 months later, our second son was born, David. And looking back at it now, we were two kids that didn't have a clue. But we just did it, we just did it. I had no role model I didn't know how to be a father. I didn't know how to be a husband. I didn't even know how to be her friend. I didn't even know how to be her friend. I was self-centered. I was all wrapped up in my own emotions and lack of sense. Anyways, we sort of mumbled on through and managed to save up enough money. And I guess the boys were 3 or 4 years old, and we bought a townhouse, a brand new townhouse, 2-bedroom townhouse, and we moved into that. And it was nice, you know. Yeah, it felt good and that. And I had moved up in my career. I'd worked for a couple of different firms and was working with a good firm, and my salary had increased. You know, I was now making about $600 a month, something like that, $500 or $600 a month. And I guess, yeah, I'm about 25. And I come home one day, and my wife has a nice big hickey on her neck. Somebody's been sucking blood, and it ain't been me. And I didn't know how to handle that at all. I didn't know handle that at all. And my whole mental nervous condition in the following time was not very bad. Back to see psychiatrists again. All kinds of stuff. And I found the solution. The solution came in a bottle. Because when I drank, I could go off in a fantasy world and I could forget about reality. Anyways, we managed to get things better. Things got better, and I think there was a period of time for maybe a couple of years we were actually in love with each other. She was a very beautiful woman. I married a very, very beautiful woman. And I didn't know it. And I didn't know anything. I didn't know anything. No. You know? And so, you know, we decided we were going to have one more baby. We wanted a girl, very much. And we planned, this was the only child that was really planned. And we planned it right down to the night, to when she was going to be the right whatever, so that she would have a girl. And we did. And we had our beautiful little daughter, Jennifer, born in 1972, July of 1972. And the following fall, we sold our little townhouse and we bought a house in suburbia, a nice 3-bedroom brand new house in suburbia with all the brand new houses and the whole neighborhood full of people in their brand new suburbia houses. And that was well, we went on fine for a couple of years, and I did some renovations and fixing it up because I'm an architecture, you know. And then she's working, and she gets a job with she had family friends who were in the pool business, so we got a deal on a swimming pool, and so we put a swimming pool in the backyard, and the kids learned to swim, and that was all nice, and that's really good and stuff like that. And then we get to meet some different people through people we knew. And one of these different people was a really interesting fellow. And he was in the hot tub business. So we got a hot tub. We actually had one of the first redwood hot tubs in the city of Vancouver. And I built a little courtyard out in the front yard, and we put our hot tub in the front yard. So we had a hot tub in the front yard and a pool in the backyard. And then I was working at this firm, and, you know, I'd been there for 5 years, and, you know, and whatever. And it's 1975, and I come home, and I say, guess what, dear? I quit. I'm going out on my own. Yes, that's right. I'm going to freelance. Aren't you excited? Yeah, okay. So that's what I did, and about a year later, I have an office downtown. I have 4 people working for me. I'm losing $1,000 a month, but I don't know it. All my employees are making more money than I am. I have one client, all my eggs in one basket. And this goes on for, I don't know how long it went, not very long. During that time, I had leased a nice new shiny car, and I bought her a new car. And I was sharing office space with an interior designer, so we had all new furniture in the house too, you know, because it couldn't be without all that stuff. So we were buying stuff. And I remember, the way I kept her happy was we'd go shopping on Friday night. And I'd have 5 or 6 credit cards in my pocket. And I was up to debt, up above here someplace. And, the bank just kept lending me more money. Yes, you want more money? Oh, we'll give you more money. And then all of a sudden one day, before that, let's see. So, our relationship wasn't, it had been built on quicksand, and it was still on quicksand. And I realize now that I was in denial. I was drinking like crazy. I'd wake up in the morning, I'd pop tranquilizers, I'd come home, I'd get in a fight with her, I'd go sit in the bar and I'd drink until it closed. I'd come home, get up the next morning, pop tranquilizers, drive in the car, go down to the office, breakfast at McDonald's. Oh, good. Well, wholesome meal. And around and around it went. And it just got crazier and crazier. And, she found what she needed someplace else. I found out some of this later on, but at the time I didn't know. And then all of a sudden, my one client, the egg in the basket broke, and the check he'd given me bounced. All my employees' checks bounced, and I was left in the lurch with a whole bunch of debt, no money. Had to shut the whole thing down. Tried to resurrect it one more time in another space, but that was stupid. That didn't work. Ended up at home with everything in the garage, all the equipment and everything, and not answering the phone because everybody was phoning looking for their money, and I didn't have it. And I was phoning my client threatening to break his legs if he didn't come up with the money. Eventually he did, but we just about lost everything. We just about lost the house and everything. And she, our relationship was dead. It was gone. It was, the last 5 years was just sheer hell. There was one time she came after me with a knife. I went into the boys' bedroom. She was coming through the door with the knife. I went out the window and I went for a walk, and she comes down the sidewalk driving her little Honda Civic, driving down the sidewalk trying to hit me. It was that kind of stuff. So it was getting to the point where she was going to kill me or I was going to kill myself, because when I had that office, I can remember I used to drive home on the freeway. It was like a half-hour drive, driving on the freeway. And I'm having this nice brand new car, it's nice and shiny white car. My white Charger, And all I can think about is, all I have to do is just turn it over and hit that concrete abutment and it's over. That's all I had to do. I just had to swing the wheel and do it. But I never did. Something stopped me from doing that. But that was my mental state, because I realized now I was dealing with depression all the time. I was alcoholic. Real alcoholic. I was drinking all the time. And smoking, a pack and a half a day on top of it. Drinking umpteen cups of coffee and not eating properly and popping tranquilizers every morning. I was a mess. I was a real mess. And so it's January 1979. 1980, January 1980. This friend I talked about that sort of was a little, got us in the hot tubs and that, he lived a rather flamboyant lifestyle and he would drink a 40-ounce bottle of scotch a day. He was that kind of a drunk. And I'm over at his place and we're doing what we both do really well, drink. And he had been at our house the week before, and he'd seen her and I in a great big fight with the kids, seeing it and that. And he decided to tell me the truth, and this was my wake-up call. And he told me that my wife had been having an affair with her boss's son. And subconsciously I knew this, but I had drank myself into a place of denial. I was living on the river of denial for about 4 or 5 years. Total denial of the reality of what my life was really all about. And I got the wake-up call, and I went home, and there's a phone call from the police, and they'd found her car. It had been stolen, and it had been stolen from her boyfriend's place. So she came home, and we had, the talk, all that sort of stuff, and decided we'd give it a try. And I said I would quit drinking. And I quit drinking for 4 or 5 months. And by that time, she'd found somebody. She'd switched jobs. She was in a new job with another fellow, and started having an affair with him. And so I went back drinking. What the hell, eh? And because that's what I do best. And there was just no hope. And there was one night I found myself, I was on top of her on the bed with my fist back, ready to let her have it. She'd been out with her boyfriend and came home, and I'm on top of her in the bed, and I'm ready to hammer. And I couldn't do it. I could not hit her. And I got up and I walked out of the room, and I put my fist through the wall. And then it was like 1 o'clock in the morning, and I phoned a born-again Christian friend, and he talked me down. And at that point, I knew it was over. I knew it was over. But I didn't have an exit strategy. And about a month later, I came home and I said, that's it, I'm leaving. And I packed up, and I got a one-bedroom, I got an apartment, rented an apartment, and went over and, moved some stuff in, moved a few bits of furniture in, so I had something to sleep on, and ta-da. And I'm there for about 2 weeks or so, and she shows up at the door with the 3 kids, and, oh, won't you please come home? Won't you please come home? And I did. The people very nicely let me out of the apartment, and I went back. And I walked back in, and I knew, when I walked in the door, I knew I had done the wrong thing. And so Christmas was coming up. I got through Christmas. January came up. She had to go into the hospital for an operation, but there was nothing wrong with her. And then my birthday was February 22nd. And a week after my birthday, I came home and I said, I'm leaving. That's it. It's over. And I knew that I had to do this. And we'll leave it at that. Because that is the point where I stepped off into the darkness of the unknown. My favorite poem. When you walk to the edge of all the light you have and step off into the darkness of the unknown, you will either find something solid to stand on, or you will be taught how to fly. So I started taking flying lessons. And that we'll talk about in the next episode of Simply Rik. Bye now. There's just one more thing I need to add to the foregoing, and that is that I am fully accountable for all my actions up until this point, especially all that took place in the failed marriage. I fully participated in it, in whatever way I did. And I want to say that I don't blame her, and I don't blame me, and that everything turned out to be exactly the way it was meant to be. As crazy as that might sound, it did. And when I look back on it today, I can look at everybody that participated in all the chaos and the extramarital whatevers. That includes her and I. And that every one of those people was part of my journey to where I am today and part of who I am today. And I hold no resentment towards anybody. So I just wanted to make that clear.